I'm Emily Kirsch, founder and managing partner at Powerhouse Ventures and founder and CEO at Powerhouse Innovation. This is What It Takes, a show about the entrepreneurs making our clean, energy-abundant future a reality. Before we get into the show, I'm excited to invite you to join our growing team. Powerhouse is hiring for 4 roles: a summer graduate investment associate, an executive assistant, an operations associate, and a marketing and communications manager. If any of these roles sound like a fit for you or someone you know, you can learn more at powerhouse-ventures.co/careers or visit my recent LinkedIn posts. And now onto the show. Over the years, we featured founders tackling long-duration energy storage from several different angles. We featured Form Energy's iron-air batteries for multi-day storage, Antora Energy's thermal system for industry and the grid, and Malta's molten salt technology that converts electricity into stored heat and back again. It has been a while since we've talked about long-duration energy storage, so today we're diving into another approach: compressed air. Our guest today saw the potential in compressed air back in 2010, and without a traditional founder background, decided to build a company around it. Curtis VanWalleghem is the co-founder and CEO of Hydrostor, a long-duration energy storage company that uses compressed air, water, and underground hard rock caverns to store energy, often designed for 10 hours or more. Curtis didn't set out to become an infrastructure developer. He was working at Bruce Power, Canada's only private sector nuclear generator at the time, trying to figure out how to deal with excess power on the grid. And when usual options like pumped hydro were just not going to work, compressed air caught his attention. Curtis launched Hydrostor in 2010 with giant underwater balloons anchored beneath lakes. Their early pilots showed promise, but scaling that approach offshore proved far more complex and expensive than expected. So 7 years later, the company pivoted from underwater balloons to underground rock caverns carved thousands of feet below the surface, flooded with water, and used to store compressed air when electricity is cheap, and then release it later to spin a turbine and generate power when electricity is expensive. As their technology evolved, so did the business model. Hydrostor shifted from being an energy storage technology provider to becoming an independent power producer, securing power purchase agreements, and financing projects itself. In our conversation, Curtis walks me through his journey, from growing up in tiny Kenora, Ontario, to leaving home for the University of Toronto, to spending a decade traveling the world as a consultant, to landing at Bruce Power, where he began exploring long-duration energy storage, and eventually starting Hydrostor. Curtis talks about deciding to become a founder and CEO without really knowing what building a company would demand. He shares his experience getting small checks from friends and family, going years without a salary, mortgaging his home, pivoting the technology and business model, and learning, often the hard way, how to raise capital and finance large infrastructure projects. Today, Hydrostor has raised more than $550 million in equity, secured $8 billion in revenue contracts, and has $3 billion of projects approaching financial close as it advances a multi-gigawatt pipeline across North America and Australia. Curtis VanWalleghem, welcome to What It Takes.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me, Emily.
Of course. So you grew up in a small 13,000 person town in northern Ontario in an off-grid house. You were burning wood for heat. You're pumping water from the lake. What was it like growing up in your town, and what were you like as a kid?
It was a fantastic upbringing, up in Kenora, Ontario, in northwestern Ontario. And it was great. Snowmobiles, boats, a lot of long winters, but beautiful summers, and a real tight-knit community with I have an older brother and a younger brother, and had a great upbringing. It was a lot of fun. I was an adventurous kid. Just got a little off track maybe in my teen years, but then got back on track. So it was overall a great experience.
I definitely want to dig in there to the getting on and off of the tracks, but tell me more about, what were you like? What were you into as a kid? Like, what did you do? How free were you to roam?
Yeah, well, we were definitely free to roam. Was a lot of motorbikes, motorboats in the summertime, took my snowmobile to school quite often. So it was me and my brothers were just out and about all the time. And ice hockey was a big part of my upbringing. I think my dad took care of the outdoor rink across the street from our house where I grew up in the early days. And so every day after school, we'd go flood the rink, shovel it, play ice hockey. And ice hockey was a big part of my sports life growing up.
And you mentioned you grew up with two brothers, and I know your parents worked really hard. They were really active in your community. And like you said, they trusted you and your brothers to kind of find your own way and be a bit free range. Tell me more about your parents.
Yeah, so my dad was, after high school, I don't think he actually finished high school, joined the mill and worked his way up in the pulp and paper mill there in Kenora and ultimately became the union president. The mill shut down, before he was retirement age. He then moved into municipal politics as a councillor. But outside of work, he was always really engaged in the community, ran the hockey associations, like I said, took care of outdoor rinks, and was just very social. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, legal secretary when she was working, and really just kept the four boys in line. And I throw my dad into
The
that
four,
mix.
including your dad.
Exactly.
Was that hard for your dad when the plant shut down ahead of him retiring?
Yeah, I think my parents really gave us a great upbringing, me and my two brothers, and it wasn't always easy for them. They were juggling multiple jobs, making ends meet, but trying to give us the best. So I think, yeah, when the mill shut down, it was a worrying time. I know they had to downsize their home, but ultimately they always made it work and showed us the value of hard work and kind of sticking together as a family. So yeah, couldn't have been a better set of parents and a better family to grow up with.
Yeah. And then, like you said, in middle school, your grades weren't great. You were getting into some trouble, skipping school, but then something shifted your freshman year of high school. What were you getting into in middle school and why? And then what shifted in high school?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it was just typical teenage rebellion years, smoking, skipping school, hanging out with bad crowd, that sort of thing. But then there was, I remember a teacher kind of really gave me a tough time and I kind of took it personal. And another teacher invited me to help build his cottage. And through that experience, his name was Mr. Broughton. He really opened my eyes to the path I was setting myself on. And he showed faith in me. He said, you're really good in math. I can tell you're really smart. And I guess that just gave me the confidence to then get back that next year and actually try in school. And next thing I know, my grades were going great. I was skipping grades in math.
Wow.
and
Wow.
really just changed on a dime, really. I was barely passing to the next year, getting straight A's and
Wow.
advancing. And yeah, it really changed my life in that grade 9, 10 kind of year.
Yeah. Did you help build his cottage?
I don't know how much help I was, but yeah, I put in quite a few hours, but he might have had to redo a fair bit of what I did.
Yeah. Yeah. What's your takeaway from those two teachers and those two approaches?
Yeah, it's really the hard love the one guy was giving me. And, I guess he gave me a chip on my shoulder that I wanted to prove him wrong. So there was a purpose in that as well. And then Mr. Broughton really motivating me and giving me that self-confidence and belief in myself, and then helping to support me along the way. So, yeah, I think there's pluses you can take from every experience, positive or negative. But, Mr. Broughton was really a big impact on my early life there and the path that I went down.
Yeah. You mentioned your dad, I didn't realize didn't finish high school, let alone have the opportunity to go to college. I think neither of your parents went to college. Is that right?
No, I'm sure my mom could have, but stuck around
Yeah.
for my
Yeah.
dad.
Yeah.
would
Yeah.
would be my guess. I don't think I've actually officially asked her that, but yeah, my dad was a really rebellious teenager, and
Runs in the family.
I guess so. And but he was always been a really smart, just street smarts person, and I think that's why socially he's always been very active, and why the union of mill workers would have picked him to be their representative.
So even though your parents didn't have the opportunity to go to college or didn't choose to, you did. In 1997, you went to University of Toronto to study industrial engineering and play varsity hockey, which you mentioned was an important part of your childhood. Why University of Toronto? Why industrial engineering? And then what was college like for you?
So industrial engineering, I knew I wanted engineering. I didn't really know the difference from one to the other. It seemed more practical, hands-on. We were fixing
Mm,
motorbikes and boats, and so mechanical, industrial just fit more than an electrical or chemical type engineering. I had three or four schools that offered me a spot on the
mm,
hockey team and
mm.
accepted me into engineering. And I never really been to a big city. I think Winnipeg was
Hmm.
probably the biggest city I'd ever
Wow.
visited, and
Wow.
never didn't have people in my family that went to school. So I remember
Yeah.
trying to decide with my mom and dad, and we just kind of said, we're going to university for jobs, and aren't
Yeah.
jobs in the cities, and go to the biggest city, which was Toronto. So that's
Yeah.
really how it ultimately boiled down. And Toronto was it was a great experience for me, especially being on the hockey team. It
Mm.
was challenging to get through engineering and do
Yeah.
hockey at the same time, as well as establish a social circle,
Yeah.
but
Was
establish a
any
great group
was
of
anyone else
friends.
doing that? Oh, sorry. To
I had one roommate that was in engineering and another that was in commerce, and I think the rest of the
Mm.
team was in arts and science or phys ed. So we kind of stuck together and would go
Mm.
late nights to library and then out to the pub and that sort
Mhm.
of thing. And we're actually still really close friends
Oh,
today, the three of us.
oh, that's special. Was it a big culture shock to go from your tiny, just over 10,000 person town to Toronto, what's the population of Toronto? I don't
Yeah,
know.
I don't know, 6 or 7 million probably.
Yeah.
It was a
Yeah.
big culture shock.
Yeah.
I even remember my parents driving me down and just kind of like couldn't find a gas station, and they just dropped me
Oh.
off, threw my bags out, and said, "Good luck, we're out of here." Um, but yeah, yeah, it was.
Oh.
And but the hockey team really helped me settle in, and it
Mm.
just kept me
Yeah.
so busy. You didn't realize. You just next thing you know, it was the end of the first year, and
Yeah.
then I had to go back home to my hometown and drive truck
Yeah. Yeah.
semis to kind of earn my way for the
Wow.
second year. So it was a really busy time in my life, but one that I think made me accustomed and got me into the rhythm of a busy life, which carries me well through entrepreneurship.
So upon graduation, you get a scholarship to join the inaugural Jeffrey Scholl MBA program at University of Toronto, which was focused on getting people with engineering backgrounds into business. And then post MBA, you spend 10 years of your life in management consulting, living all over the world. When you think about that early part of your career and that stage in your life, what feels most formative?
I had an opportunity to meet Jeff Skoll, who was from
Wow.
University of Toronto,
Mm,
and the generosity of his donation into
mm,
that program. I never would have been able to afford to do an MBA early in my
mm,
career,
mm,
so that gave me an opportunity, and it really got me into business. I didn't practice much engineering. I think that training was great for my mental models and stuff like that, but really set me on the business path early. So that was very formative of him donating to create that program and then me being accepted into it. After my MBA, I went to India to do some volunteer work with a Jesuit. My grandfather's brother was a Jesuit priest in India for a long time. I went over to help him out and see some of the work that he was doing. That really opened my eyes to
mm,
international and different cultures. And then, yeah, Deloitte's management consulting, about 9 or 10 years, traveling the world, Korea, the Middle East, Germany. It was a post MBA, and really
mm.
learning what real businesses are like in a series of different industries. So I wouldn't trade it for the world. I think a lot of things I got lucky breaks to get into Deloitte, to get into the school program, to have a relative that gave me an opportunity to see another part of the world. So very grateful for all the luck and good breaks I've had along the way.
Maybe some luck, but also a lot of hard work on your part. Tell me about the time in India. Like, what was that like for you? Had you been abroad before?
I had never been abroad before, so kind of went by myself. Had to make my way all the way up to Darjeeling in the northeast of India, and then I lived at a school, a little private school that they had, that the Jesuits had, called North Point, and taught at some refugee camps, helped some low-income hospitals with their IT systems and processes, got to see some leprosy wards that Father Van had set up. And it was just a real eye-opening experience for me, learning about, the difference between arranged marriages and love marriages, and a lot about the religious way of the Jesuits. And, when I was leaving after a series of months there, Father Van offered to take me to Bhutan to spend time with the royal family, because he had educated some of their the younger family. And what an eye-opening experience, seeing that country and being able to talk to the ministers in charge of building airports up in mountains and making it a 100% renewable country, and their gross national happiness. And so it just, I came back a different person. And I had proposed to my wife just before leaving, and thankfully I didn't change enough that she wanted to take back her saying yes. But it was a really, really great experience.
So then after 10 years, you decide to leave Deloitte because you want to control your own destiny versus just helping inform the destiny of others. And that led you to Bruce Power, Canada's first private nuclear generator. But once you're there, you start running into the limits of energy storage. Tell me more about that time. What were you doing, and what was holding you back as it relates to energy storage?
Yeah, so it was Bruce Power. I was leading the business planning. So we consolidate all the budgets, all the capital investment plans and strategic initiatives, get that approved through the board, and help track and implement them. So I had a team there. They had someone else in that role, and they left just as the planning season. So I'd worked with them in the past, so they had called Deloitte and said, could Kurt second over? And I was ready for a change, so went and did that. And I saw that there was a bunch of maintenance costs going up because they were being asked to turn the grid or turn the nuclear plants down every time we had too much power on the grid. And for those familiar with Ontario, it has 50+% nuclear, a whole bunch of run-of-river hydro. And so it's almost 90% baseload that you can't turn down. Limited interconnectors to the US and the neighboring provinces. So we were getting surplus baseload and having to turn the nukes down, which was impacting their life and driving up maintenance costs. So the natural reaction is, don't waste that power, store it. And tried to build pumped hydro plants, saw how virtually impossible they are to site, permit, and build. And so I started a hunt in 2008 on there's got to be a different way of storing power. And that's kind of what brought me to my co-founder at Hydrostor, and ultimately what put me on the path to starting Hydrostor.
First, how did you meet your co-founder? And then when you were deciding whether to leave or not, what was your risk calculation? Like, how much did you actually understand about what you were getting into?
So Cam Lewis is my co-founder. He's the guy with the genesis, the idea of Hydrostor. And his basic logic, he was developing a wind farm adjacent to one of the Great Lakes. And he thought about putting pumped hydro. And once he saw the same challenges, he said, well, if pumped hydro is holding water up in air for potential energy, what if we put air underwater and we got the buoyancy force? And because air compresses, it takes up much less space. So that was his basic idea. He filed a patent. I had a member of my team sleuth and track him down and set up a lunch. And he was very early at a concept stage, and he was looking for someone to start the business with. I was a little disappointed he wasn't further along, and we couldn't adopt it at Bruce Power. But I saw the potential in the idea, and because I was looking to restart my career, and Bruce Power's about 3 hours north of Toronto. My wife was pretty adamant she didn't want to move up there. So I knew that wasn't a long-term fit for me. And so it was a great opportunity to start something afresh. I would say I went into it extremely naively. I really didn't know what I was getting into, the scale of it. I'd never raised money before. I didn't really know what starting a business would take. And I started it with no salary. So I put the first bit of money in along with this gentleman, Tom Rand, and went years without a salary. And I just thought it would go a lot quicker. And so I didn't realize how big of a risk I was taking. My logic was, if I try and it fails, it's still something good on the resume. I'll learn something, and that combined with my background likely means I'll be able to find a job anyway. So that's how I got comfortable. My wife got comfortable, but it was a naive risk, one I'm glad I took, but I probably wouldn't take it in hindsight, knowing what I know now.
Yeah. I wonder how many founders would say the same thing.
Probably a lot,
Yeah.
based on some conversations I had. I think it's the you hear the success stories, you don't hear the
Right.
grind it takes to get there and how
Yeah.
many don't make it. So that
Yeah.
illusion is out there, and it's kind of yeah, it's what gets people to make the plunge.
Yeah. Yeah. It reminds me of the quote, we do these things not because uh, they're hard, but because we thought they'd be easy.
Well said. Yes.
Okay, so you meet your co-founder, they have this patent, but not much else. They want you to start the company with them because you're the kind of business person. How soon after you meet do you decide to start the company? And what was that moment like? And how much convincing of each other did you have to do?
Yeah, so I think it was about 6 months after I met Cam that
Hmm.
I made the plunge and formally joined. This gentleman, Tom Rand, who had was trying to advise Cam from an incubator, and he offered him up some money, but he also convinced a government program to have what they called an embedded executive. So give I think it was about $50,000. If someone's willing to take the plunge into entrepreneurship, this will give them a little bit of bridge financing to the executive, not to the company. So he arranged for that. He agreed to put some money in and kind of match any money that I could come up with my friends and family, and my parents and brothers and aunts and
Wow.
uncles all gave me a little bit of money from their investment accounts and retirement savings, 10,000 here, 5,000 there.
Wow.
So I cobbled together some money. I took a lot of our savings, decided to quit my job. Because I was seconded from Deloitte, the Deloitte team was fantastic. They let me keep my
Mm,
laptop, my phone,
mm,
my benefits, and said,
mm.
look, if it doesn't work out, you've always got a
Wow.
spot back here. So that
Mm,
made it a little bit easier, having benefits for my family and whatnot. And then that embedded executive program, Tom Rand coming in. And Cam made it easy by saying he knew he was I don't think he'd mind me saying this, a disorganized inventor guy, creative, but not the guy you would want running your checkbook. So he said, Kurt, you be the CEO and I'll report into you
Wow.
as the chief technology officer. That
Mm.
made it extremely clean for me to raise capital and control the business, and yeah, ultimately set us on the path.
Yeah, yeah. It's incredible that your friends and family joined you in your initial raise. Like just I know they don't come from a ton of money, so the fact that they did that is just a real testament to their belief and faith in you.
And it made a couple of Thanksgivings when things weren't going well a
Yeah.
little bit awkward. But I got to
Yeah.
say, they invested at about $1, $2 a share, and we're at about
Oh wow.
20, 25 now.
All right. There you
So,
go. They're happy now.
they're happy now, and they've had a chance to take a bit of money off the table at
Good.
different times.
Good.
So now I don't feel bad going into those Thanksgiving dinners.
Good, good. So you mentioned in 2010, you decide to start Hydrostor. At that moment, what felt clear to you about the idea? And then what did you not yet understand
So I think
about what the journey would be like?
Yeah, so I think from first principles, I knew climate change was a big problem, that I wanted to
Mm,
do something about that,
mhm,
that renewable energy intermittence would be the lowest cost, and that
mm,
they would need some sort of firming up or storage. Um, Pumped hydro was winning the day. Batteries were wildly expensive at the time.
mhm,
Flywheels
mhm,
were actually a lot more popular than
mm,
lithium ion. But I knew that was short duration and it wouldn't really scale to the long duration. And I saw firsthand pumped hydro's limitations. So I just said, like, this is an alternative to pumped hydro that goes where it doesn't.
mm.
And the world's going to need a lot more of that. And I wanted to contribute to climate change. So that was kind of what I knew. I also knew if it failed, I could probably get another job. So
Mhm.
then what I didn't know how to raise money. I had probably a 10-person team was the biggest team I'd run at the time.
Mm,
Um, I didn't have a great network in the startup space because I'd been spending my last 10 years traveling around.
Right.
So there was a lot. I knew nothing about patents. I'd never been in a board meeting other than presenting to the Bruce Power board a couple of times. So definitely a ton of things to learn. But you don't know what you don't know kind of thing. And
Yeah.
it makes it easier to take the plunge.
Yeah. So I understand in the first 7 years of Hydrostor, you're operating on very limited capital, kind of just barely getting by about 1.5 million from, like you said, friends, families, grants, a small team of maybe 10 people, and just trying to keep the company alive while pursuing an unproven capital intensive idea. Tell me about what was the technology you were pursuing at the time, and then what defined that stretch for you as a founder?
So the technology, what we do is advanced compressed air energy storage. And really, so compressed air is really you just use surplus electricity to pressurize air. And when you release that air, it spins a turbine, recreating electricity on the backside. Where we call it advanced is there's two things. One, we store the heat. So when you compress air, it gets hot. We pull that out and store it in a thermal store and reintroduce it when it's expanding. And the second is, where do you put the air? We were using this air underwater. So we started with balloons under lakes, and we were targeting the Caribbean islands to go take them off diesel, put solar on everyone's rooftop, a couple of bags off the deepest coast to store and be the lungs of their energy system. And so that's kind of what we started on. We had to build pool tests. Then we had to get a truck with a compressor in it and some heat exchangers and buy a boat to sink balloons offshore and weigh them down with big blocks.
And when you say balloons, we're talking like 30 feet, or so diameter?
It started with smaller balloons, but we ultimately scaled up with Toronto Hydro to build a 1 megawatt hour pilot plant called our Toronto Hydro pilot plant, Toronto Island pilot plant. And it had 6 or 8, I think it was 8 balloons that were 30 feet high, about 20 feet in diameter, about 240 meters underwater. So this was a big structure. We had actually sunk 3 different structures trying to bring it out, and that failed.
Oh, no.
We even at one point had an insurance claim that paid out so we could try again. It was really, and we were the constructors, like Cam, me, and a few of my early employees on boats doing it ourselves. So it was a great learning experience. We really learned the technology in and out, got that plant working, tested it for about 5 years. So, but yeah, I think we had 3 different smaller scale plants that were all temporary before that. And that was our first one that once we got our Series A financing, that's what we used it for, along with some grant money.
Tell me about the Series A.
That was tough. There must have been 250 rejections. It was a really, really challenging time. I think Clean Tech 1.0 kind of had failed just before that. So this was like in 2013, and apps were taken off, and nobody wanted to fund a capital intensive business. Especially one that seemed so far off, because people would say, yeah, I get that wind and solar will be big parts of the grid, but they really weren't in 2010, 2011. So it took a visionary leader in ArcTurn Capital or ArcTurn Ventures to see the potential and want to get behind really hard problems. So a great tribute to them. They negotiated hard, and it took really long. There was a couple other people that were brought to the mix late in the game, but yeah, about a year and a half, 250 rejections, mortgaging the house to make sure we could survive to kind of get to the ultimate yes. And
Tell me about that. Tell me about that decision.
Well, it was, you could, the eternal optimist in me feels like you're almost there. You just need this one more thing. And it was actually ArcTurn and one of their partners that said, we'll do it for you, but only if you get an offtake contract. And we felt, oh, we got everything else. And now we're going to get our Series A, we're going to get venture backed, but we need a PPA. And I said, how hard can that be for an unproven tech in an unproven market? And lo and behold, start putting home equity line of credit stuff on. Cam and I flying to Aruba, which was trying to become a green island, and they had a big wind farm and some solar. And they had a visionary prime minister, but head of their utility, Francis Ross and his team. And they said, you know what, we're willing to give this a shot with you. And so they gave us a power purchase agreement to put some balloons offshore of their wind farm. And ultimately, we came to them later and said, it's not economic to do it underwater the way we had designed. And so we had to unwind that PPA. But that got us the Series A financing. So we managed to pull it off and get that power purchase agreement and repay the home equity line of credit that we've been racking up as we
Good,
chased
you kept
it.
your home.
Yes.
Good. What was it like having to tell Aruba and the prime minister and everyone you were working with there that it wasn't going to work? And tell me about coming to that conclusion, because it sounds like you are so dogged and hardworking. How did you ultimately come to the conclusion that what you were doing just wasn't going to work?
Yeah, it was tough and I didn't want to believe it. And so we tried so many different ways, but it was really just that the fact that air isn't very dense and it has a lot of friction losses when you move it. So you need a pretty wide diameter pipe. And getting it offshore an ocean with crashing waves at the scale, we were talking like 10 megawatts. It just doesn't make any sense to be drilling under and marine construction crews out. Like the installation costs just blow you out of the water. And so we tried all different things. And ultimately, it was really disappointing and I felt horrible. And I remember having to fly there with the sole purpose of wanting to deliver the news in person. And,
Wow.
they took it well. I think it probably impacted some people their career when they believed in us from the utility, and it ultimately didn't work out and they were so public with it. And so it felt terrible, but the best thing to do is just hit it head on. We did, they understood. And, to their credit, that island has stayed on their journey and are one of the greenest islands across the Caribbean and are still doing great work. But yeah, that was tough. And once we really saw the writing on the wall, we took our creative genius Cam and some engineers and put them off site and said, we know the fundamentals work. Just this configuration doesn't. Figure out what the configuration that does work. And they came back with the solution. We had to pivot all of our patents to reflect the new configuration. But that really set us up, and that's the configuration that we're out deploying today.
At that moment, you fly to Aruba to tell them in person that it's not going to work. At that point, you could have just said, it was a failed experiment. I'm going to move on with my life and my career, go back to Deloitte, get another stable job. But you didn't do that. Instead, you put the CTO and your team in a room and say, figure it out. Tell me about that decision. Was that a hard decision, or was that this is what we're doing now?
I remember actually getting a job offer at that time, and it was worth a pay that I had never even considered in the past. It was probably double what I had been making at Deloitte previously.
Wow.
But it wasn't long thereafter that we got our Series B, and Lorem Partners came in to invest in their Series B. And that's when we really realized we can't do this. For me, maybe it was a bit of my small town upbringing, but I was like, Arcturn, Tom, now Lorem Partners believed in me and the company and were willing to trust us with their money. And then I had a team of 10 at the time, and they quit stable jobs with families to come join me. And when I started thinking about having to call everybody that had given me money or the trust, and after going through the experience with the Aruba executive, I was like, you know what? That to me is harder than solving the problem at hand. So I much preferred to put every waking moment into solving the problem at hand versus trying to go tell people why it didn't work. I couldn't face that unless literally there was no possible way forward.
Okay, so you decide you can't tell your team or your investors that it didn't work. Instead, you decide to figure out a new new structure for it's the same fundamental idea, but an evolution of the technology. How did the technology evolve? Like what did you pivot to?
Instead of putting balloons under a body of water, we would mine out the existing rock under land and flood it with water. So bring the water, make a hole and bring the water to the hole, as opposed to putting a balloon under existing bodies of water. And it turns out it's far more cost effective. It's got a ton of benefits. Takes up, I think, 1/20th the land of an equivalent pumped hydro plant. It's easy to permit. You can put it almost anywhere. The downside was it had to be a lot bigger. So instead of a 10 megawatt plant, you needed 500 megawatts. And Jeez. We're talking 10 plus hours, so 5 gigawatt hours per plant. So now it's a totally different ballgame from the capital intensive standpoint, and the fact that you can't just sell these things now. You have to project finance them because they're infrastructure. So we had to become an independent power producer. And if I thought raising a $5 million Series A was hard, now we need billions of dollars. So that was the genesis. But I said, now these are just business problems, raising capital and developing infrastructure. We can do this, but I need a different team, and I've got to change my mindset about how we fund this business.
How did you do that? Like, how did you know how to do that?
I didn't. Again, naive. But my president and my chief commercial officer soon thereafter, John Norman and Jordan Cole, joined. And they were at Brookfield on the hydro and development and renewable side. So John and I had known each other in the past. He had just left Brookfield and was coming back to Canada saying, what's my next thing going to be? And I said, well, you've got the experience that I don't have, which is what is an independent power producer? How do you get massive power purchase agreements? How do you develop? So he agreed to join and kind of stand up an independent power producer arm of the business, because I had no clue. And then I just had to really up my game in raising capital. And instead of looking for small venture money, it now looks like infrastructure, big private equity, project debt, and evolve the team, kind of from there. So I still get surprised by what John, Jordan, and the IPP side of our business can do, identifying new markets, how they triage opportunities, secure interconnection rights. It's permits. It's an amazing skill set, and couldn't be more blessed with the team I have.
So as you're fundraising and have this new type of capital that you need to raise, tell me more about what you were selling them. Like go into a bit more depth on the technology itself.
So what we would sell, the technology, we would buy off the shelf compressors, compress them, run it through a heat exchanger, store that in hot water up on the surface, then go 2,000 feet underground into a mined out rock cavern. So we'd send people down 2,000 feet underground, mine out what's the size of essentially a football field, about 40 feet high, bring that rock up to create a hole, then dump water down the hole, and the air would go in and lift the water up. A valve would hold it, and then when you need power, the valve opens, gravity pulls the water down, pushes the air up, it heats up again, and then spins a turbine. So what we said is it's all off the shelf. The compressors are used in natural gas, the turbines are steam turbines, the heat exchangers are basic, storing hot water is easy. They store propane in rock caverns. So we just put together a unique, but it's all proven. And we've built pilot plants so we can get kind of insurance to guarantee the production, the round trip efficiency. So people could wrap their heads around that, a bit of a unique thing, but they could wrap their heads. But where's your revenue contracts? And that's really where the IPP side of the business gave them some initial development money from that Series B that Lorem backed us on, Lorem Partners. And they said, well, where can we get power purchase agreements? And they decided New South Wales, Australia, and California would be the first markets to break. So we started applying for interconnect and land and engaging regulators and utilities. And once they started to get traction with off takers, that's really what we were using to raise money. We'd say, we've got a technology that's patented in a market that's growing, and we've got traction on our initial projects. And, that traction had to turn into real meaty traction, but ultimately allowed us to secure a large investment from the Goldman Sachs asset management team, as well as the Canadian pension plan. And that's really when we kind of took off as a company.
Coming up, Curtis reflects on the stretch between the pivot and Hydrostor's first big wins, when the team was rebuilding the technology, reshaping the business, and operating on a shoestring budget during COVID. But first, a word from Powerhouse Innovation. What It Takes is brought to you by Powerhouse Innovation. Powerhouse Innovation is a best-in-class consulting firm that works with leading corporations and investors to identify and evaluate the startups shaping the future of energy and industry. Our clients include Google, Cisco, Black & Veatch, and many more. Powerhouse Innovation recently supported Mitsui with technical diligence for its investment in Fervo Energy's $462 million Series E. The diligence followed earlier work delivering a comprehensive landscape of next-generation geothermal startups. We're proud to continue our work with Mitsui's Green Innovation Department as it evaluates innovative, firm energy solutions aligned with its strategic objectives. You can read the case study by visiting powerhouse-innovation.co/clients. Powerhouse Innovation serves as a trusted partner to organizations navigating complex technology landscapes, helping them uncover best fit startups and evaluate their strategic potential. If your organization is looking to accelerate your innovation or investment outcomes, we would love to connect. Email us at hello@powerhouse-innovation.co to get in touch. And now, back to the show. After you make the pivot in the technology, but ahead of those first few major contracts, there's a 3 to 4 year period where you're kind of figuring out the new tech. Is that right? And if so, tell me about that time period.
Yeah, and wedge COVID in there as well. So,
right.
So we're building a pilot plant. So with Lorem Partners coming on board and that successful Toronto Island pilot, we got a commercial contract through the IESO in Ontario for our Goderich plant. So we built that. And
how big was that? And how big was the Series B?
The Series B was about 20 million, 25 million. It was a few different series of it. And then we did the Goderich plant. That was a 2.5 megawatt, roughly 10 megawatt hour, fully tolled to the electricity operator, and a fully commercial plant, just small. There was a pre-existing cavern we were able to leverage. So we built that. So now we showed it works. We know how to build them. We can meet all utility requirements. COVID hits, we're in a funding crunch again, but we take our last bit of money, John and Jordan, identify these markets, start investing, and we secured full deliverability in California. We won a contract in Australia, and then California came out with a mandate to start buying long duration storage. So we prepared a bid. And so that was really the bits and pieces that we had. But you're doing that on a shoestring budget, half a world away from Toronto, Australia, even California's a ways. And then COVID hits and you're locked out of Australia. So we have to hire people within the market. And it was, the most dynamic team, responding to pivots, and we all worked constantly. And I hardly remember COVID because I was just locked in a room working and solving problems constantly. And it was, that's really when we earned our keep. Our team deserves to be where they're at, and that's really where they earned it and proved it.
In terms of the technology post pivot and ahead of getting these big contracts, what was working? Like you said, a lot of it, it's off the shelf. You're just putting pieces together. What worked seamlessly kind of from the beginning, and what just did not work at all according to plan?
The fact that we had to become an IPP, I think we noticed that before a lot of our competitors and staffed it accordingly. And a lot of people just want to license, stay capital efficient. Utility will buy it from me. And they're not set up to do that, and they don't care about your technology the way you care about it. So recognizing that and investing in it accordingly worked well and really served us well. There was always pivots with the like small things with the technology, how you mine out the cavern. Do you drive trucks down, or do you sink a shaft? What type of rock do you go at? Do you try to use existing porous formations where you can drill from the surface, or do you literally have to send miners underground? What type of compressors? And there was groups that came out that were getting really well funded by GE and Khosla and all these others, and they were doing a much more complicated, they were going isothermal, which means don't let it heat up or not heat up, but you have to reinvent machinery. We said from day one, use existing machinery, and the secret sauce is in that cavern. But there was a lot of fits and starts and suppliers that wouldn't support us because we weren't big enough and we didn't have an order. So, and we didn't know how all the machinery would work. So there was a lot of little things, but the team just stayed at it and got through. And because we had that IPP capability out there securing contracts and getting us land and interconnect, we had projects to feed it into but we were making the plane as we flew it. Absolutely.
And you position yourselves as, and you are, long duration energy storage. What is the duration? Like, what kind of duration were you getting, especially for those first two projects? And how does the round trip efficiency compare to other types of long duration energy storage?
Yeah, so for us, it's just a matter of how big you build the cavern. And so if someone wants an 8-hour system, great. If they want a 20-hour, if you want 30 hours, it's a linear scale on how big we build that cavern. And the advantage is the cost of that marginal cost is so low. It's like 1/10 of a battery. So the break even,
a lithium ion battery.
A lithium ion battery. So in the early days, the break even was about 2 or 4 hours with lithium. Now with their costs coming down, the break even's probably 6 or 8 hours. But at 1/10 the cost to add the next hour, we really there's no way they would have to get down to 90% cheaper than what they are today on a fully installed basis to touch us at 12 or 16 hours. So a much better cost profile. We last 50 years, no degradation. We provide inertia. We have lower operating costs. So there's all those advantages. The round trip efficiency, they'll say 85%. That's typically without their auxiliary loads and different things like that. So it's actually a little bit lower. We're about 65%, can probably get up to close to 70. We just found that the markets don't pay for it. We'd have to put in more heat exchangers to just get out more heat, but there's just diminishing returns. And so about 65% is where we hit. So not our best selling feature, but when you add the lower cost, longer life, no degradation, domestic jobs, whereas the batteries obviously aren't manufactured domestically, it's a compelling alternative, but there'll clearly be a role for batteries. But we think compressed air is a nice complement.
And the two big projects, one in California, one in Australia, did those come about before or after Goldman and CPP joined?
Those were the first two projects that we had started getting traction on. And what separated the private equity team at Goldman is they could see ahead. Most of the other investors were like, we'll come in when you're ready for financial close. But they said, we'll come in and do the development with you. And they understand the risks and the necessary flexibility you need during development. So we had been shortlisted for one revenue contract, and we had secured interconnection on the other. That's really all we had, and some land rights. They got in and said, let us put proper development capital behind you, let you build the team you need to. And now we've secured about $8 billion of revenue contracts across those projects and others, and are approaching financial close on roughly $3 billion of construction capital. So it's been an adventurous 3+ years with them, but without their capital and mentorship and flexible, having a flexible investor behind you, I don't think we would have got to where we're at.
Yeah. It's a long way from the $5,000 to $10,000 checks from your parents and friends and family.
Certainly is.
How did those first two contracts, the first two big wins in California and Australia come about? I know you said, you did the market analysis, you started investing in, lobbying and relationship building, but say more about that because I feel like those first two that changed the trajectory of the company, they're pivotal. So how did they happen?
I'll start with Australia, where I'm calling in from today. It was the Transgrid is the biggest transmission company in Australia. They had a challenge in a very remote mining town. It's something like a 400 kilometer, 500 kilometer small transmission line to feed it, and it's getting end of life. So they said, what are we going to do? They ran what's called a regulatory investment test. Do we build a new transmission line? There's no gas network out there. Do you put diesel on the other side and have massive diesel tanks and trucks running up and down? Or do we try to make it a mini grid? And so they ran a process open to any technologies. And we went in and we said, look, this isn't a good fit for batteries. There's mines, including existing caverns. Why don't we go out there and propose repurposing one of the mines into our cavern and put compressed air, and there's already wind and solar, but we'll enable more, and we'll turn it to a mini grid. And they had some visionary technical people on their team that said, this is the future, this is what we need to be doing. They're making this investment for the next 50 years. And the Australian government had set very aggressive decarbonization targets because their grid was primarily coal, and they don't have a lot of domestic gas and great solar and wind. So we ended up winning that RIT, or regulatory investment procurement, against a whole host of other competitors. So that was really the anchor contract that gave us the confidence to invest in Australia. And that was about 5 years ago. And we're just hitting financial close, imminently. So it's been a long journey. We had to change regulations. Then Transgrid realized they couldn't get cost recovery, so we had to convince regulators to change how they treated transmission companies, and we had to then get additional contracts to pile on, build more wind and solar. So it has been very complicated, but has now set a precedent and a pathway across Australia. In California, it really started with us getting interconnection, which is out of Cluster 13. It's a very challenging thing to do in Australia, and a big shout out to my team to find the right way and where to apply to secure that. Then through support of not just us, but many in the community, the CPUC, the California Public Utilities Commission, put out a requirement for companies to buy long duration storage because they were having so much wind and solar on their grid and the gas was going away. They knew they needed it for reliability. So we bid. And I remember it, we were already under due diligence with Goldman Sachs, and the off-taker called us and said, we didn't pick you guys. And we had put a lot of stock in it. So I called Goldman, the head guy, and I told him, look, we didn't win. And he's like, thanks for letting me know and being so transparent. Let me think about it. And I kind of thought it was, now we're done. They're going to walk away. And there really wasn't many other investors that saw the future like they did. So wildly disappointed. Got a call.
Did you think that was the end of the company?
I did.
That moment?
I actually did. Yeah. I remember going outside to my wife and telling her the news. And I was pretty devastated. But I had to call him immediately and tell him, and I think he really appreciated that. Then the next day or 2 days later, we got a call from, this was a collection of CCAs, or Community Choice Aggregators. One of them called us the next day and said, I know the collection made this decision. We want to splinter off and contract with you. And we called Goldman Sachs back, and one, we built credibility by being so honest and open. And two, it wasn't the full amount, but it was a good chunk. Central Coast Community Energy, 3CE, big shout out to them and their entire team for having that foresight. And once that kind of came through, then Goldman had said, look, you've got traction on both of these. We promised at the time, we'll make sure we get one of the two, because development is still fraught with risk, but they quickly turned that to, you guys better get two of the two, and we expect a bunch more. So we're on our way.
Mm. How many times have you all been within, I don't know, a month or a few weeks of shutting the doors?
More times than I would like to think, but I can remember four or five pretty
Yeah.
clear where I thought it was done, and
Wow.
it took probably a week of sleeping on it, creative team, getting a lucky break like the one I just described. But
Yeah.
it's not an easy path for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, and that's why you become so humble and grateful for where you get to that it's you don't want to take anything for granted because it takes a lot of luck. A lot of stuff's not in your control, and
Yeah.
you're just so grateful for everyone that has
Mm.
supported you along the way.
Yeah. I love that mindset and the tenacity and you being willing to share the realities of company building and the ups and downs. And I think so often, like you said earlier, all we see is the up and to the right and the LinkedIn posts and the raises and the valuations. And it's just so easy from the outside to believe that that's all it is. So I appreciate stories like this that make it clear that is not the real world and featuring founders like you that have been at it since 2010 and the ups and downs along the way and where you are today. Um,
A 16-year overnight success.
yeah, exactly. You started Hydrostor in 2010, so more than 15 years ago. Last year, you raised a 200 million Series D, bringing total capital raised to 550 million just in equity. Who has financially backed you along the way? I know you mentioned a couple of the investors, Arcturn, Lorem, Goldman, CPP. What rounds were the easiest and hardest to raise? And then what should other founders know about raising capital in a capital intensive business?
Yeah, so a couple more key investors. One is the Canada Growth Fund and Baker Hughes, the equipment oil and gas supply company, who we have a partnership with and use their compressors and turbines, as well as a lot of balance of plant from them. So a great list of investors, a lot of individuals that I've crossed paths with along the way as well, investing smaller amounts. And very grateful for an absolutely fantastic board and shareholder group. All of the capital was really hard to raise. I won't lie. Series A was probably mostly because I was so immature as a leader and someone that had never raised capital before. The Goldman Sachs round was extremely hard because of the scale that we were looking to do. But now it's all about the returns on projects, and you're competing with public companies for capital and wind and solar projects or proven battery projects that maybe have a slightly lower risk profile and a higher return. So they're all hard in their own way. So it'd be tough to call one out. I have, PTSD from all five of them, to be honest with you. And they all take longer than you expect. I think that's the biggest thing is I'm amazed by some companies that are able to raise these rounds. And it's probably a testament to the CEO and the CFO of those communities, or they've got a company that just has blow it out returns, but it's never been easy. It's always a big adventure.
Yeah, yeah. And any guidance for founders that are also in capital intensive businesses as it relates to fundraising?
I think being really honest with yourself about what the expectations are and try to get it buttoned up first. So revenue contracts, these can't be MOUs. People see through those so easily. You've got to have true revenue contracts, true path to permits. Insurance, we had to get performance insurance to guarantee, even though we've got Baker Hughes as an investor selling us and giving us long-term guarantees through their balance sheet. So it's really hard. You've got to be really honest with yourself, because if you get out ahead of it, you can poison the well, as they say, and then people don't take you credibly. And so just knowing what it's going to take, and it's tough to do when it's your first time doing it. That's why having team members like I mentioned earlier, the folks from Brookfield, my CFO, who's been the CFO of nuclear companies and transmission companies, and they bring a sense of realism to my optimism and tell me, Kurt, you ain't ready for that right yet. We're going to have to put a few more things in place. And what it takes to get project financing, it's like I say, I've been learning as I go, but that the team's really been teaching me about what it takes and making sure we have those pieces in place first.
Mm-hmm. Today, Hydrostor is developing multiple multi-billion dollar projects across various markets. How would you describe the company's commercial traction at this stage?
We've got about 9 billion of PPAs signed or imminent signing. We've got about 3.5 billion of projects entering financial close that have been probably 75% debt finance. So the balance either through project partners or funded by ourselves. And we've got a pipeline of 7 gigawatts, which
Wow.
averages about 10 hours, so 70 gigawatt hours of projects in North America, Australia, and are increasingly turning our eye to Europe and India as those markets are getting the right regulatory constructs in place to finance this sort of infrastructure. So a lot to do, a team of about 160, 170 people based in Denver, Toronto, and Melbourne. So, yeah, an exciting time with a lot going on.
Hmm. How has your leadership style changed since you founded the company in 2010?
As a consultant, predominantly before I started Hydrostor, I was kind of a super doer, if you will. And so I was doing engineering, preparing slides, doing Excel, and that's kind of got us through our Series A, Series B. Then it was much more of you got to turn into raising capital, and then I, hired the IPP team, and they kind of managed that side of the business and hired engineers way smarter than me to manage the technology. So I was raise money, which was building trust with investors, being transparent, authentic with them, and ultimately just staying at it until you got there. Now that the team, once they crossed about 100 people, my job is much more turned to governance for the board, but also just motivation and making sure that there's clarity on our vision and our pathway. So it has evolved. My board, my chair, Judy Johansson, has been great in helping me identify when I need to change and getting in front of it and making sure I get the right mentors and that sort of thing put in place. So it's been a real evolution for me. I feel like a totally different person, and I'm just blessed for the experience.
Mm-hmm. Can you speak to being who you are, being a man, being white, operating in the work and industry that we're in? What has that been like for you?
Probably easier than any other, either female or visible minority. So, yeah, I haven't had anything. I think for me, it's more, I haven't grown up in the sector. So, whether it's the venture side of it, I haven't had a big, I didn't co-found a business before. I don't have investors that have a long track record with me. I come from a small town. I don't have a big network. And I wasn't in the electricity sector. So the investors kind of view me as, we have founders that are more our typical, and utilities that are like, yeah, you don't quite have the experience. So I have to put that IPP executive team forward there. And raising money, I've proven it a fair bit, but now with my CFO, Beth, she really steps in a leadership role there. And so now I'm settling into where I think I actually do shine, coming from my smaller town, and my hockey background is about pulling teams together, motivating, setting a plan, and just showing people the positive path and how we're going to get there. And that's, I think, where I can contribute the most. And I haven't always been able to play that role because there's either no team to lead or you had no money to spend to go anywhere. So now I can actually settle into a role, and I feel like I've finally hitting my stride as a leader. And I think it's showing up in the progress the company's making.
You are obviously founder and CEO. You're also a partner to your wife, a parent to your son. That is a lot. How has building a company alongside building a family shaped the way you show up in each role?
It is challenging. I think my wife Kara has been, she was a teacher for about 15 years and chose to retire when my life started to get really hectic, and we had our son, and it was like, this isn't going to work the way we've got it set up. And she wanted to spend more time raising our son. And so that combined with our minimalistic lifestyle, if you will, we don't feel the need to keep up with the Joneses and we have old cars and small house and that sort of thing. And we choose to spend time together. So when I travel abroad, they often come with me when it's convenient, and they make my life outside of work very easy. I don't have a lot of hobbies or things that I do outside of work other than family. So I've kind of sacrificed on what I do that's not work and family. And my wife sacrificed her career and maybe fancy purses and stuff like that to ensure that we can do it on one salary, and we don't need that to be anything crazy. And we just prioritize time as a family and being together and keeping things simple. That has been great for me. And I've got a very great relationship with the family, and really happy that it's all worked out the way it has.
Yeah. I appreciate your point on not keeping up with the Joneses. I think in the world of venture and, pensions and having billions of dollars in PPAs, it's so easy to get caught up in that. And I'm sure you're exposed to that lifestyle all the time, and just staying grounded in what really matters. And I think given how you grew up, I can imagine that was a good foundation for having clarity on what ultimately matters in our life.
Absolutely. Funny story, and hopefully my co-founder doesn't mind. He's retired now and lives in Brazil, and still contributes to work a little bit, but for the most part has moved on in his life. But I remember when our Series A, we got a term sheet. It wasn't even signed, and we certainly hadn't closed. But we received a term sheet. The next day he shows up in a yellow convertible Corvette at the office. And I'm like, damn, what are you doing? He's like, I leased it. We're getting this. I'm going to will this term sheet to come to. I go, you're crazy. But
my gosh.
That's Cam.
Wow. Talk about a spectrum.
Yeah.
Did that term sheet get signed?
It did. That was the ArcTurn one. We had to get the Aruba stuff all done before we actually got the money, but it ultimately went through.
That's hilarious. I'm happy he got to keep his Corvette. That's really funny. Zooming out, if we exceed at long duration energy storage, especially in the form at which you are creating it, what does the industry look like, and what does Hydrostor look like in a decade?
So when I look at it from top down, if we're to actually meaningfully impact climate change, a lot of stuff has to electrify. So electric vehicles, a lot of industry, so it's just the most efficient way of doing it. So that means a grid's got to double or triple, maybe even quadruple. I've seen some estimates. So you just think about how much money for 100 years went into building the grid. Now double or triple that, do it in the next 30 or 40 years. And storage is probably, you need it for about a third to a half of that. And so even if we're just a couple of percents contributing to storage, batteries will be a big chunk. Pumped hydro still has a role. There's other technologies. There is more than enough opportunity for us. And I just look at our pipeline of that 7 gigawatts of projects. That's like $30 billion in construction capital. And we see that coming in the next 4 to 5 years. So it's a tremendous amount of money, of opportunity, of impact, of decarbonization that can happen, and lowering electricity bills, driving affordability, and keeping the lights on, because our electricity system is now the most important system for our hospitals, our healthcare, our computers. You don't want blackouts nowadays. So resiliency is really, really important, and energy affordability.
We're going to close with our high voltage round. These are quick questions with quick answers, 5 seconds maybe per answer, starting with Curtis. If you were an animal, what animal would you be and why? And not what you want to be, what you would be.
Fox, a winter fox up in the north tundra.
How come?
Just that's what I grew up with. And I love spending time outdoors in the trees, solitary. I love time to myself, and harsh conditions. That's what I'm made for.
I love it. I love harsh conditions. That's like an entrepreneur. That's a founder statement right there. What inspires you?
The future, the kids,
Mm,
I
mm,
love nature and I just want to
mm,
contribute and leave
mm.
the world better, but, more prosperous, all that. So just, yeah, the future. I'm an
Yeah.
optimist, perpetual
Mm.
optimist.
If you had to start a new career tomorrow, what would it be?
I would probably get into drones,
Mm.
something to do with defense. I
Hmm.
think the
Hmm.
defense industry, especially coming from Canada, we've got to be a lot more
Mm.
sovereign on that. And just
Yeah.
seeing what happened to Ukraine and just how
Yeah.
amazing they've responded,
Yeah. Yeah.
that seems like an area that would be exciting, fun, and contribute to
Mm.
sovereignty.
Mm. Yeah. Other than yourself, to whom do you attribute your success?
Absolutely, my wife and family,
Mm.
parents, existing family, but then
Mm.
probably the partner that's been with me the most with is John Norman, my president.
Mm.
He
Hmm.
really helped change the business when he joined 8 years ago. So he's
Mm.
had the biggest contribution in it, many of our team, early engineers, but I'd call out John specifically.
Mm. Tell me about a specific time that you have failed.
Oh, which time? Specific time. What was the most crushing failure?
Back to the enjoying harsh conditions. I love your go to where it hurts.
Yeah, I remember in MBA when I was trying to get summer jobs, and I said,
Hmm.
I'm an engineer. I was doing hockey. I thought I'd be great, and in my hometown, I am great. A lot of, but I didn't even get the interviews, and I
Wow.
I really had a
Mm.
struggle to get a job there, and I think that's when
Mm.
I really realized, wow, there's a lot of highly capable people, and I've got to
Mm.
really up my game if I'm going to be successful. And then just
Mm.
the constant rejection of trying to raise capital and
Yeah.
getting laughed out of rooms by
Mm.
and some
Wow.
investors are really harsh. And
Yeah.
maybe I needed it, but I look back and I'm like, boy, did you have to really stick the dagger
Yeah.
in and turn it like that?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so those hit, and I'm a sensitive guy. So those,
Mm-hmm.
you'd go home
Mm-hmm.
and you know, shed a tear to yourself and be like, wow,
Yeah.
why am I doing this kind of thing? So
Yeah.
there's been a lot of that, but you learn
Mm.
from it. You got to learn to accept it and take it as a blessing when people give
Mm.
you feedback. That was longer than five
Wow.
seconds.
Okay. Talk about optimist. What is something that you thought was true that you no longer believe?
Logic prevails. It just amazes
Oh,
me that connected people, different interests can really tilt the chessboard in their
yeah.
favor, and it's you have to learn to fight a little dirty and roll up your sleeves, and
Mm.
don't just because you're a nice person doing what makes
Mm.
sense that it's going to break your way.
Mm. When are you your best self?
When I'm relaxed, I think when I get stressed, I get focused, but I get very direct.
Mm.
And if I'm busy, my mind gets cluttered. So I like to go
Mm-hmm.
home, spend a lot of time by myself, and that really
Mm.
recharges me. And then I show up as
Mm-hmm.
my best self after
Mm.
having time to decompress. So definitely
Mm-hmm.
once I'm relaxed and I have time
Mm.
to process.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What is your worst trait?
Worst trait. I can rush to judge. Like I like solving problems and I jump right
Mm.
in, but
Mm-hmm.
sometimes that's not really the best solution. That you've got to seek more information you don't have. But
Mm.
I like to think I can come up with the right answer very quickly, and sometimes that gets
Mm.
me in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
I need to make sure I properly assess everything, and because I'm inexperienced in a lot of ways, there's things I don't know, and they come back to bite you later. So
Mm.
don't jump in too quick and get more information.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. If you could change one thing about the world, what would it be?
I think I would probably say that fairness, equality.
Mm. Mm.
I saw it from my hometown, a big Aboriginal
Mm.
population there, traveling the
Mm.
world, living in India. It's incredible the equity the social inequities that exist across the world. And it's really hard to solve, obviously, but if I could, and I had a magic wand, I would like to more evenly distribute benefits and wealth across the world.
Yeah. If there was just one person who was going to hear this episode, who would you want it to be?
Ooh, tough one. I mentioned John, so I'm going to have to say John to give him his flowers because he has been a big part of it.
Oh, it's great. I hope he listens. We can send it to him. Finish these sentences for me. Companies fail because
they run out of capital.
If you really knew me, you would know.
I care a lot about everyone at Hydrostor and what we're doing.
Mm-hmm. Success is
making an impact and contributing, not necessarily the capital rewards, but contributing to society and to your community.
If I could have done one thing differently, I would have
raised a lot more money a lot sooner and hired the team I have now a lot sooner.
Do you think you could have?
Probably not. Without the lessons learned, you couldn't raise the capital, and the team I have now never would have joined in the early days without, being able to properly compensate and show them the path forward. They're too smart to be as naive as I was.
If the world knew me for one thing, it would be
hopefully being a great father, but I think probably Hydrostor is right now what would, if you Google bomb me, that's probably what you would learn.
I'm most proud of
the family, for sure. My son Eli, and just the family that I have.
And last question: to build a successful startup, what it takes is
grit, resiliency, tenacity, and just sticking with it. And there's so many off ramps to quit. Just don't take them if you believe in the fundamental value proposition.
Curtis, I have so enjoyed this conversation and getting to know you better and just getting a sense of your journey and how far you've come. So thank you so much for sharing your story with me and with us on What It Takes.
I really enjoyed the conversation, Emily. Thanks for having me. And it's great to be on such a platform. So congrats on the podcast. And thanks again for having me.
Curtis VanWalleghem is the co-founder and CEO of Hydrostor. Join us each month for stories of founders who are building our clean, energy abundant future, their upbringings, their risks, their failures, and their breakthroughs that are transforming our world. Before we wrap, a quick reminder, Powerhouse is growing. We are hiring a summer graduate investment associate, an executive assistant, an operations associate, and a marketing and communications manager. If any of these roles sound like a fit for you or for someone you know, you can learn more at powerhouse-ventures.co/careers or via my recent LinkedIn posts. What It Takes is produced by Powerhouse Ventures and Powerhouse Innovation. Powerhouse Ventures backs seed stage startups developing innovative software across energy, mobility, and industry. If you are thinking about building something in this space, get in touch with our team at powerhouse-ventures.co. Powerhouse Innovation partners with leading corporations and investors to source and evaluate disruptive startups shaping the future of energy and industry. You can learn more at powerhouse-innovation.co. Lastly, if you're enjoying the show, you can support us by leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And if you know somebody who you think might like this episode with Curtis VanWalleghem of Hydrostor, we'd love it if you shared it with them. Julia Rani is our producer. Christopher McGovern is our media engineer. Original music by Sean Marquand. I am Emily Kirsch. This is What It Takes.